All right? Let me tell you something that still makes my skin crawl whenever I think about it. Even now, years later, when I feel something brush against my leg in the dark, my heart jumps like it did that day. I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I spent most of my adult life in the field, studying ecosystems, crawling through forests, sleeping in tents where the night sounds are louder than your own thoughts. But Australia taught me a lesson about how small a human really is. I was 37 at the time, a behavioral ecologist working with a small research group studying soil biodiversity in eastern Australia. Most people imagine Australia as endless red desert, but the place we were working in was nothing like that. It was dense bushland just outside the Blue Mountains, humid, thick with eucalyptus trees, and tangled with ferns and leaf litter so deep that every step sounded like you were walking on paper. Our focus was on arthropods, spiders, insects, all the small creatures that most people ignore. Funny thing is, when you spend enough time around them, you start to respect them more than fear them. I had handled dozens of spiders in my career, always carefully, always with tools. Funnel web spiders were different, though. Everyone in Australia knows about them. Aggressive, fast, and their venom. Well, let's just say it can kill a human if treatment isn't quick. But like most researchers, I believe knowledge and caution were enough. That morning started slowly. The sky was gray, low clouds hanging over the hills like wet wool. The air smelled of damp bark and eucalyptus oil. I remember kneeling beside a rotting log, gently brushing away leaves with a small trowel, documenting the microhabitat beneath it. My recorder was clipped to my vest, and I was quietly describing everything I saw: soil moisture, fungal growth, insect activity. The forest was quiet except for the occasional screech of cockatoos somewhere above the canopy. I had been working alone for about 40 minutes while the rest of the team mapped nearby plots. That wasn't unusual. In research like this, you often spread out so everyone can gather separate samples. I remember lifting the log, and that was the moment everything changed. Underneath, it was a dark hole in the soil, about the width of a coin, lined with silk threads like a tiny tunnel entrance. I recognized it immediately: a funnel web burrow. Normally, you'd step back and mark the location, but I leaned closer, curious. The entrance looked abandoned. There was no fresh silk around it, and the soil looked slightly collapsed. I wanted to photograph it. The mistake was putting my left hand down on the ground beside the hole. I didn't even see the spider emerge. What I remember is the sudden sharp sting on the side of my finger, like being jabbed by a burning needle. I jerked my hand back instinctively, and that's when I saw it. A glossy black spider clinging to my glove, thick legs gripping the fabric. Its body was bigger than I expected, maybe 5 centimeters across, its fangs still buried in the material. My stomach dropped. A male funnel web. And it was angry. I shook my hand violently, and the spider fell into the leaves, disappearing instantly. But the damage had already been done. I pulled off my glove, and 2 small puncture marks were already swelling on the side of my finger. At first, I tried to stay calm. Panic is the worst thing you can do with venom. Your heart rate spreads it faster. But within minutes, the symptoms started. My skin felt like electricity was crawling under it. A wave of nausea rolled through my stomach, so hard I nearly threw up. My mouth filled with saliva, and my heart began hammering against my ribs. That's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a dry bite. The spider had injected venom. I grabbed my radio with shaking hands and called the team. My voice sounded wrong, even to me, tight, breathless. "I've been bitten, funnel web. I need help." The forest suddenly felt enormous and empty. The nearest road was at least a kilometer away through thick bushland, and the venom was already working. Sweat started pouring off my face even though the air was cool. My muscles began twitching uncontrollably, little spasms rippling through my arms. I remembered the survival protocol instantly: pressure immobilization. My hand shook as I tore a compression bandage from my pack. I wrapped it tightly around my finger, then my hand, then all the way down my arm to slow the spread of venom through the lymphatic system. But the symptoms kept getting worse. My vision blurred. My chest tightened. My breathing became shallow and fast. I could hear footsteps in the distance, probably my team running toward me, but the forest sounds were mixing with a strange ringing in my ears. For a moment, I genuinely thought I was going to die there. Not from a bear or snake or some dramatic predator, but from a spider the size of my palm hiding under a log. The psychological fear hit harder than the physical pain. My brain started racing through every story I'd ever heard about funnel web bites: the sweating, convulsions, the cardiac collapse. I forced myself to lie still. Movement spreads venom faster. So I just lay there on the damp forest floor, staring up at the gray sky through the trees, trying to breathe slowly while my body betrayed me with tremors. Minutes felt like hours. Then finally I heard crashing through the brush. My colleague Marcus burst through the ferns first, his face pale when he saw me. They didn't waste time. One of them reinforced the compression bandage, while the others built a makeshift stretcher using branches and a tarp. Every movement sent waves of dizziness through me, and my muscles felt like they were tightening into knots. The worst part was the sweating. It poured off me like rain. They carried me out of the forest as fast as they could, stumbling through uneven ground while I tried to stay conscious. By the time we reached the truck, my jaw was clenching uncontrollably. The drive to the hospital felt endless. The road twisted through hills, every bump sending pain shooting up my arm. But eventually the hospital lights appeared. And that's where the real turning point happened. The doctors moved fast. As soon as they confirmed the bite, they administered funnel web antivenom. Within an hour, the worst symptoms started easing. My breathing slowed. The twitching faded. And the crushing pressure in my chest finally lifted. I spent 2 days in a hospital recovering, my body exhausted but alive. The doctor later told me something that still chills me. If I hadn't applied the compression bandage immediately, if I had panicked and run instead of staying still, the venom could have spread much faster. The outcome might have been very different. Now when I tell this story, people expect some dramatic ending, some heroic moment where I fought off the spider. But survival isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about knowledge, preparation, and controlling your fear when your instincts are screaming to panic. That tiny black spider reminded me of something the wilderness teaches over and over again. Nature doesn't hate you. It doesn't care about you at all. And if you forget that, even for a moment, you might not get a second chance.